This is more than an audiobook. It's a remembrance, a return, a reclaiming of all the parts of you that were never lost, just buried beneath the noise of expectation, performance, and pain. These words aren't here to teach you who to become. They're here to remind you of who you've always been. Let the remembrance begin. Chapter 1. The return to who you've always been. You had just forgotten your name. You weren't born broken. You were born remembering. And then, little by little, they convinced you to forget. Forget your worth. Forget your voice. Forget your place. Not because they were evil, but because they had forgotten too. There's a throne in the spirit with your name on it. It's never been occupied by anyone else. It didn't disappear when you doubted yourself. It simply waited until you were ready to sit again. Not because you earned it, but because you finally stopped rejecting what had always belonged to you. The question has never been, are you worthy? The real question is, when did you stop acting like you were? Somewhere along the line, you started shrinking. Maybe it was the way they looked at you. Maybe it was the silence in the room when you spoke your truth. Maybe it was how they laughed at your dreams. Maybe it was how they clapped for everyone but you. Whatever it was, it didn't mean you weren't powerful. It just meant the world wasn't ready for someone who remembered so early. You tried to fit in. You tried to soften your edges. You tried to downplay your knowing. You wore masks. You bit your tongue. You played roles. But nothing felt right, because truth doesn't shrink to fit trends. And neither do you. So let this land gently. You don't need to become more. You just need to return. To your voice, to your center, to your sacred posture. Because the throne was never empty. You were just busy surviving. Every time you said yes, when your soul whispered no, you wandered a little further from yourself. But not anymore. This is the chapter where you stop wondering. This is the moment you return to your seat. No more begging to be seen. No more waiting to be chosen. No more performing for rooms that couldn't hear your frequency. You're not an extra in someone else's story. You're the author of your own. So when you walk into the world from now on, do so with the awareness of someone who already belongs. You're not trying to get there. You've always been it. You just needed a reminder. Let this be it. Say this with me. I return to the throne of my being. I forgive the version of me who forgot. I reclaim my name, the Spirit. I take my place with humility, but without apology. I don't need validation. I carry resonance. I don't need to shout. My presence speaks. I don't need to earn a crown. I am the frequency of royalty. The world may not know what to do with you now. Let it adjust. Let them wonder. Let them watch you take your seat again. Because when one soul remembers, it gives others permission to do the same. And now that you're seated again, speak, move, rest, and create from there, from the throne, from alignment, from the place where you no longer ask, am I enough? Because now you know, you always were. The throne was never up for debate. The crown was never lost. You only had to remember the sound of your own name. You've remembered now. Don't forget again. And if you do, come back here. The throne will still be waiting. Chapter 2. You're not too intense. They were just too comfortable with your silence. You were never too intense, too loud, too sensitive, too emotional, too honest, too direct. That's just what people say when they're too comfortable with your silence. Because your silence, it served them. It kept things easy. It kept you manageable. It made them feel strong. But that was never your role. You weren't born to be palatable. You were born to be powerful. They didn't fear your intensity. They feared what your truth would require them to face. Your voice made them confront the parts of themselves they abandoned. Your energy held a mirror they weren't ready to look into. And so, they labeled you. Too much, too complicated, too loud. But the truth is, you were just fully alive. You weren't asking for attention. You were asking for authenticity. And when you didn't get it, your soul raised its volume. Because that's what it does. You can't suppress what was born to express. Not without consequences. Not without leaking out sideways through anxiety, fatigue, resentment, self-doubt. So now, it's time to stop making yourself small so others can stay comfortable. You don't exist to protect someone else's unhealed wounds. You don't exist to play quiet while the room forgets how to hold truth. You don't exist to be tolerable. You exist to be real. You are allowed to take up emotional space. You are allowed to speak even if your voice shakes. You are allowed to feel without apologizing for it. You are allowed to need things, to cry, to want more, to ask for better. And you don't need to soften your edges to be lovable. The right people will not only handle your intensity, they'll honor it. Because your fire doesn't burn them. It warms them. It awakens them. And anyone who tells you otherwise has simply forgotten their own flame. So take this as your permission or your reminder. You are not a burden. You are a breakthrough. You are not too much. You are medicine. You are not unstable. You are untamed. You are not dramatic. You are deeply awake. Let your voice rise again. Let your presence become a frequency, not just a form. Let your tears be prayers. Let your fire be sacred. This world doesn't need another person pretending everything is fine. It needs you, clear, vibrant, and unwilling to disappear again. You don't need to fix your intensity. You need to remember that it's your gift. A soul that still feels deeply is a soul that still hears the call. And yours has never stopped listening. They were never afraid of your voice, only what it would awaken in them. You were not sent here to whisper. You were sent here to rise. Let them adjust to your volume. You've adjusted to theirs for long enough. Chapter 3. You were never too much. They said you were too loud, too sensitive, too emotional, too honest, too intense. And for a while, you believed them. So you shrank. You softened your laugh. You bit your tongue. You edited your truth. You learned how to read a room before you entered it, not for safety, but for permission. You asked yourself, how do I make them comfortable? But never. Am I comfortable here? And in trying to be more palatable, you became less whole. But here's the truth they never told you. You were never too much. They were just too limited in their capacity to receive you. Your depth was never the problem. Their shallowness was. Your fire made them sweat. Your clarity made them question themselves. Your presence reminded them of the parts they've hidden away. But you? You are always medicine. Not everyone knows how to receive medicine the first time. Some reject it. Some mock it. Some spit it out and call it bitter. That doesn't make you wrong. It doesn't make you dangerous. It doesn't make you unworthy. It makes you potent. It makes you rare. It makes you unforgettable. You weren't made to fit into small minds or fragile egos. You weren't made to dilute your power so others could stay asleep. You were made to feel fully, to speak truth, to shift rooms just by being in them. You were made to take up space, not apologize for it. And if your emotions shake the ground, let them. If your voice cracks glass ceilings, let it rise. If your presence unsettles what is false, let it. So this is your permission slip. Stop apologizing for the way your soul takes shape. Stop dimming what was always meant to shine. Stop believing the myth that you have to make others comfortable to be loved. Let your laughter echo. Let your emotions spill. Let your truth be loud and unmistakable. Because someone, somewhere, is praying for the very energy you've been hiding. Someone is suffocating in a world of suppression, and your freedom is their invitation. When you live fully, you show them what's possible. You remind them that being whole is not too much. It's the point. So say it with your chest, with your heart, with every inch of your being. I was never too much. I was never too loud. I was never too soft. I was never too complicated. I was never too anything. I was always exactly what I was meant to be. And now, I give myself back to me, unapologetically, unedited, unshrunk, unleashed. Because the world doesn't need a quieter version of you. It needs the real one, the radiant one. the remembered one, the resurrected one, the one who finally understood. You were never too much. You were always just enough. And now, you rise. Chapter 4. When you stop proving, you start becoming. There's a moment where the chase just ends. Not because you've given up, but because you've woken up. Woken up to the truth that no external validation will ever compare to inner alignment. You've spent years gathering evidence, trying to prove your worth through performance, through being agreeable, through being accomplished, through being productive, through being perfect. But nothing ever felt like enough. Because the proving was never about truth. It was about survival. You were taught that love had to be earned, that success had to be chased, that rest had to be deserved, and that your identity had to be validated by others to be real. But that was never the truth of your being. There is nothing to prove. There never was. There is only who you are and who you're willing to remember. And remembering doesn't require effort. It requires surrender. You don't need to prove you're smart enough, healed enough, humble enough, spiritual enough, worthy enough. You already are. You don't need to prove your capacity. You need to return to your clarity. You don't need to keep earning your existence. You need to rest in your essence. This is the moment you put down the performance. This is the moment you breathe differently. This is the moment you stop running for approval and start walking in alignment. Because proving is heavy. But becoming is freedom. And here's the truth no one told you. When you stop trying to impress the world, the right things start flowing toward you. Not because you force them, but because you stop blocking them with false versions of yourself. You're magnetic when you're real. You're radiant when you're rooted. You're powerful when you're present. Let go of the proving. It's not your job anymore. You don't have to explain why you're enough. You don't need to justify your choices. You don't need to rehearse your truth. You just need to be. And let the world adjust. Say this with me. I release the need to prove. I release the impulse to perform. I release the pressure to impress. I release the fear of being misunderstood. I release the guilt that kept me small. I welcome back my wholeness. I welcome back my knowing. I welcome back my presence. I welcome back my enoughness. I welcome the version of me that never needed a stage to be seen. I welcome the power that doesn't shout, it radiates. I welcome the gentleness that holds its own ground. I welcome the stillness that no longer begs to be believed. Let yourself be seen by the world, not for the mask you've mastered, but for the soul you've remembered. You were never here to convince. You are here to exist, fully, boldly, unapologetically. That's where the real life begins. Not in the proving, but in the becoming. Chapter 5. The parts they couldn't love. There were pieces of you they simply didn't understand. Not because they were broken, but because they reflected too much truth. Your joy was too uncontained, your pain too honest, your dreams too daring, your voice too unfiltered. And so, little by little, you tucked those parts away. You became selective with your light, measured with your magic, quiet with your convictions. You dimmed what made you radiant, just to stay embraced. But their discomfort was never proof that you needed to change. It was evidence of where they had not yet softened. You see, people often reject what they've exiled in themselves. Your authenticity held up a mirror they weren't ready to face, and instead of leaning in, they turned away. But here's what's sacred. Just because they couldn't love those parts doesn't mean they are unlovable. Your boldness is still worthy. Your softness is still sacred. Your dreams are still divine. The parts they labeled too much were simply ahead of their time. And what a shame it would be to clip your wings, just to be held by hands too afraid of flight. You didn't lose love. You lost a version of connection that required you to shrink. Let that be a blessing in disguise, because now you no longer have to audition for closeness. Now you no longer have to rehearse your humanity. Now you get to be whole, even if that means being misunderstood. You get to be wild and tender and unfiltered and real. You get to gather every scattered part and say, you belong to me, with me, as me, the too much, the not enough, the still becoming. All of it is welcome here, because what they called chaos was always just your color. What they feared in you was what they had not yet embraced in themselves. And anyone who can't hold all of you was never meant to carry your light. So reclaim it. Every edge, every dream, every memory you once tucked away. Reclaim the version of you who laughed too loud, the part that cried too often, the one that still needed softness. Let them all come home. Because none of it was ever too much. It was just waiting for you. And now that you've arrived, let the world adjust. Chapter 6. You don't owe them a softer version. There comes a time when you stop reshaping yourself for others, when you stop offering watered-down words just to keep the peace, when you stop tiptoeing through rooms, shrinking your truth to fit someone else's comfort. That time is now. You don't owe them a softer version of your fire, not the version that whispers instead of speaks, not the one that second-guesses every feeling, not the one that waits for approval before taking a step. You've been told that to be loved you had to be easier to swallow, less passionate, less direct, less whole. But that narrative was never yours to carry. Your clarity is not cruelty. Your boundaries are not betrayal. Your voice is not a weapon. It is a resurrection. For too long, you were taught to make others feel safe, even when it cost you your voice, even when it drained your spirit, even when it buried your needs. But peace that costs your authenticity is not peace. It's performance. And you weren't born for performance. You were born to live real and bold and unedited. You were born to hold truth in your hands and offer it, not as a demand, but as an invitation. Yes, kindness matters. Yes, grace heals. But grace without truth is enabling. You can be soft and still say no. You can be loving and still walk away. You can be light and still refuse to be dimmed. So stop handing out explanations to those committed to misunderstanding you. Stop apologizing for the way your truth feels on their ego. Stop sacrificing your evolution to maintain old roles. You're not who you were 5 versions ago. And that's something to celebrate, not suppress. There is power in your no. There is clarity in your enough. There is liberation in choosing yourself, fully, unapologetically, repeatedly. Let the world adjust. Let the discomfort settle, because the ones who truly see you won't require a diluted version to stay, and the ones who walk away were never walking toward you to begin with. You don't owe them a softer version. You owe yourself the whole one, the real one, the radiant one, the one who never needed fixing, only remembering. You were never too bold, never too vocal, never too clear. You were just too alive for people, still learning to breathe in their own truth. And now, you no longer owe anyone your silence just to feel held. You no longer need to blur your brilliance just to belong. You don't owe them a softer version. You owe yourself the freedom to be fully seen and still stay whole. Chapter 7. The unseen roots of your strength. You don't always see where your strength comes from, because it doesn't come from performance. It doesn't come from applause. It comes from the quiet moments no one else witnessed. from the nights you held yourself when no one came through, from the days you kept showing up even when your heart was heavy, from the decisions you made in silence, the ones that saved your soul. Your strength was never loud. It didn't announce itself. It whispered, and that was enough. The world taught you to associate strength with noise, with dominance, with control. But your kind of strength? It's different. It's the kind that chooses softness in a world that rewards hardness. It's the kind that forgives without forgetting, that protects without punishing, that walks away without needing to prove a point. There were moments you felt weak, but those were the moments your strength was becoming invisible, rooting itself deeper, anchoring you, preparing you to rise. Because strength isn't always what it looks like. Sometimes it looks like surrender. Sometimes it looks like stillness. Sometimes it looks like falling apart, just enough to come back together wiser. You didn't get here because life was easy. You got here because you kept going, even when your voice trembled, even when your past haunted you, even when you questioned your worth over and over again. You made it, not by chance, but by courage, by resilience, by an inner knowing that said, I am allowed to take up space even when I feel unseen. So, if no one ever told you before, hear this now. You are strong, not because you've never fallen, but because you've always found a way to rise again. Even if the rise was slow, even if the rise was messy, you carry the wisdom of every version of you that survived. And those roots, the ones no one ever saw, they're holding you still. You're not lost. You're becoming grounded. And your strength? It was never missing. It was just deeper than most could see. I see you. Not just the version you show the world, but the one who's quietly held so much for so long. The one who kept it together when no one asked how you were really doing. The one who carried others while hiding your own aching. The one who stayed soft, even after being broken. You didn't deserve the silence you received, but still, you chose to speak life over yourself anyway. That is strength. So here's what I want you to remember, always. You are not defined by who hurt you. You are defined by who you chose to become despite it. You are allowed to pause. You are allowed to protect your peace. You are allowed to be proud of the healing no one else saw. Your strength is not for performance. It's for you. You are whole, even when you feel hollow. You are seen, even when the room goes quiet. You are worthy, even when you're not producing, proving, or pleasing. Say this to yourself the next time the old voices return. I am not too sensitive. I am deeply tuned. I am not too much. I am power made tender. I am not broken. I am rebuilding from wisdom. I am not invisible. I am rooted in unseen strength. And the most important truth of all, I don't need to become someone else to be worthy of love. I only need to remember who I've always been. It was never about becoming more. It was always about seeing the roots and realizing you've been strong all along. Chapter 8. The Power You Forgot You Had. There's a kind of power that doesn't ask for attention. It doesn't beg for recognition. It simply is, steady, sure, and deeply rooted. This chapter is a return to that power. Not the power you perform, but the power you embody when you finally stop looking outside yourself. You've spent years measuring yourself against standards that were never yours, trying to meet expectations that never felt aligned. But what if the metric was never how loud you could be, but how deeply you could stay in truth? What if your power wasn't in how others perceive you, but in how well you remember yourself? The world trained you to equate value with visibility, to believe that worth comes with performance, but real power? It often blooms in silence. It grows underground, in the invisible choices you make when no one is watching, in the quiet courage to stay soft when everything tries to harden you, in the way you keep showing up for yourself, even when no one claps. This isn't about ego. It's about essence. It's about the quiet strength that's been waiting for you to notice. You don't need to earn your place anymore. You don't need to hustle for your worth. You were powerful before they applauded you, and you'll still be powerful when the applause fades. So breathe in this truth. You are not here to chase power. You are here to remember it, to reclaim it, to walk in it, without fear or apology. The version of you who doubted, they were doing their best with what they knew. But now you know better, and that means you live differently. Not from force, but from flow. Not from resistance, but from reverence. Power is not something you push. It's something you hold. So today, let your body remember. You are not striving for impact. You are the impact. You are not waiting for validation. You are the confirmation. You don't need permission to shine. You only need to stand in the light that was always yours. And as you walk this path, may every step echo this truth. You already are everything you once hoped to become. Chapter 9. You were never asking for too much. You were asking the wrong people. There comes a moment when you realize you were never asking for too much. You were simply asking people who were committed to giving too little. It wasn't your standards that were too high. It was their willingness that was too low. You wanted presence, but they only offered performance. You wanted connection, but they gave convenience. You asked to be seen, and they blinked. Not because your needs were excessive, but because your truth exposed what they weren't ready to face in themselves. You learned to shrink to stay in the room, to edit your voice so others could stay comfortable, to accept breadcrumbs and call it a feast. But deep down, something sacred in you always knew. You were built for more than managing people's discomfort. You weren't born to be polite in the face of neglect. You weren't created to be grateful for halfway love. You were designed to be met fully, deeply, and without apology. So if your heart still carries shame for what you asked for, let this be your release. You were not needy. You were attuned. You were not dramatic. You were aware. You were not demanding. You were devoted to love that felt honest. The problem was never the depth of your desire. It was the absence of people who could meet you there. And that's not your fault. That's your awakening. Because the moment you stop proving your worth to those who don't recognize it, you begin attracting those who do. It starts with you. You become the one who no longer abandons yourself. The one who doesn't shrink their needs into whispers. The one who no longer waits for permission to be fully met. You stop knocking on closed doors. You stop twisting yourself into shapes that don't fit. You stop apologizing for wanting connection that feels like home. And slowly, something shifts. You soften into your own arms. You begin to listen when your soul speaks. You recognize the quiet miracle of choosing yourself and not needing it to be explained. You walk away. Not bitter, not broken, but anchored in the knowing that real love never asks you to become less. This is your return to dignity, to clarity, to a love that sees you without translation. You're not asking anymore. You're remembering what it feels like to be met in full. And this time, you're not settling. Chapter 10. You don't need to be who you were to be loved now. You contorted, softened, apologized, performed. You wore the right tone, the right face, the right silence. All for love that asked you to disappear just to be seen. But none of it was your fault. You were just trying to survive. You learned that love came with conditions, that safety meant shrinking, that connection required cost. So you gave parts of yourself away like offerings, hoping someone would find them worthy. You became the version of you they could handle, palatable, predictable, manageable. But inside, a quiet ache grew, because the real you, the full you, was buried under all the roles you learned to play. You laughed at the right moments, bit your tongue when truth tried to rise. Let others define you so you could belong, even if the belonging was hollow. You told yourself, this is love. This is normal. This is just how life works. But now you're waking up. Now you're remembering. This chapter isn't a rebuke. It's a return. A return to the you who never needed a costume to be loved. A return to the you who didn't apologize for being too loud, too deep, too intuitive, too feeling. You don't need to stay loyal to the version of you that was built in survival. You don't need to keep reintroducing the mask you wore, just because it made others comfortable. You're allowed to evolve, to shift, to become unrecognizable, even to the people who once called you home. If they only loved the quiet you, the selfless you, the agreeable you, then it wasn't love. It was convenience. Because real love isn't threatened by your becoming. It doesn't shrink at the presence of your power. It expands to meet you in your wholeness. You don't owe anyone the past version of you just to keep the peace. You don't need to keep performing the you they remember, when that version was built from lack. You were not put on this earth to play small roles in someone else's comfort. You were born to be whole. Today, you can choose differently. You can choose love that doesn't make you disappear. You can choose presence that doesn't cost you your essence. You can choose to believe this truth. You are not more lovable when you're smaller. You are not more worthy when you're agreeable. You are not more deserving when you abandon your truth. You are not a burden for becoming who you really are. You are not a disruption. You are a divine recalibration. And you never had to earn love through erasure. So breathe deep. Honor the one who learned to survive. But don't stay there. You are not here to be who you were. You are here to rise. And let love meet you where your truth lives.